Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar brought to you by Singular and Google. Today, we are talking about re-engagement, how the best mobile apps grow smarter and faster. But before we get started, a few words about Singular. For those unfamiliar with Singular, we are a marketing intelligence platform that connects your data from thousands of sources, measures user behavior via mobile attribution, and unlocks insights at the most granular levels. For years, Singular has been powering growth for the most sophisticated marketers around the world. So if you want to learn more about Singular, check us out at singular.net and request a demo. All right, enough about us. Now, let's get started. Before we get started, I want to talk about re-engagement as a whole. We are talking about performance marketers, and user acquisition has traditionally been the main objective. In the early days, it was about SEO and being at the top of the search results. Then in 2013, it was about manual targeting. And then in 2016, the focus was on smarter targeting, smart bidding. And now in 2019, it's about lifecycle optimization. Now, there are three key pillars of lifecycle optimization: get them, keep them, if you can, get them back. In other words, acquisition, retention, and re-engagement. Today, we're talking about re-engagement. And to help us with all of your burning questions about re-engagement, we have two incredible panelists who I am very excited to introduce. First, we have Fiona Ryan, the Global Product Lead for App Re-engagement at Google, and Santiago Diaz, the User Acquisition Manager at Rappi, the leading on-demand delivery app in Latin America. And I am your moderator, Christen Luciano, Director of Partner Development at Singular. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Christen. Nice to be here.
Awesome. All right, before we get started, I want to let the audience know that you can type your questions into the Q&A box on your screen, and we will do our best to answer all the questions at the end. All right, let's get started. First, I have a question for Fiona. This is to set the stage. Let's start with super simple. Why should you do re-engagement, and what place does re-engagement have in the app marketer's toolbox?
It's a great question, Christian, and I totally agree with your observation that really what we've seen is that the focus on user acquisition campaigns has shifted over time, and now more and more marketers are thinking about ways that they can re-engage their users, which makes sense because if you think about it, 37% of installed apps remain in use after a week, which is fairly low. So that means that we're facing, as marketers, a double challenge. How do you acquire your users and then retain them? And this is where app re-engagement can come in to ensure that you're keeping those users and minimizing waste.
Makes sense. And Santiago, I want to let you have a chance to jump in. At a high level, what do you need to think about when you're setting up a re-engagement campaign? How do you manage and optimize it?
For me, an appropriate re-engagement campaign consists of having a clear problem that you want to solve and a broad audience that you want to target. It's just like part of doing the job and start testing different things according to your plan and the conversions that you want to obtain. Talking about optimization, basically what I always like to do is just like start with a broad audience and do consistently A/B testing across all different possible levels, like different audiences, messages, creatives, time of day for the communication, and even different channels that will set the leverage for what you want to achieve.
Makes sense. Segmentation. All right. Well, next question. This is actually for both Fiona and Santiago. Let's talk about channels and success factors. I'm going to ask both of you, but we'll let you chime in first, Santiago. You can use push, email, ads. Which are most effective? Oh, sorry, Fiona first.
Sure, I can kick us off. So I really don't think, in my experience, there's one effective way to re-engage your users, but I do think that there can be an effective combinations of methods that you can combine. And as you mentioned, I mean, push notifications and emails, they are all really effective organic methods for sure. But what we're seeing more and more is that users are choosing to opt out of those methods, and so they may not be reachable in that way. So in that way, re-engagement campaigns can help you really fill that gap by helping you to connect users or to connect to your users.
And now, do you think that that varies by type of app or by goal?
Yes, it does. It definitely does vary. So marketers in different verticals or industries or with different goals may rely on one method over another. So for example, if I have an e-commerce app, I might tend to, lean more towards utilizing email promotions, rather than, let's say, if I have a gaming app, then I might use ads to reach different user segments. Whereas email is, more of a wider blast of all of your audience. But the good news is that we're not limited to trying just one or the other. And as I mentioned before, I think a good combination is the way to go here.
Great. And Santiago, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely, totally agree with Fiona on that point. I think they are all effective based on the audience that you want to target and on the communication that you want to achieve. Maybe an email is something that you want to communicate when you have a longer promotion or something that is going to last longer, maybe a week or something, or throughout the whole day. And through a push communication, you're going to blast basically all your audience to target to a conversion in a really small span of time. So basically it depends. And also look, the audience it's really important because not everybody wants to have the same communication. Not everybody wants to be targeted the same way.
Makes sense. Now, channels aside, what about messaging and offers? Santiago, what is a good reason for users to return?
For me, it's all about convenience. Uh, and convenience and service really. And user will return basically if he has a good service and has had a good experience before. This is like something kind of new, and basically all the market is turning familiar with the term of the super app. That's basically it's an app that you are going to be used throughout the whole day. So that's the goal out of it. For me, like from convenience to get all the different products and services to the different audiences that you want to get.
So you're saying it does vary by app and of course by goal.
Yeah, basically, and also like coupons are really good, and everybody loves the really good offers, but they're appropriate, and it depends on the communication that you want to achieve, and the time of the customer journey. It's also important to get so that you don't waste much money over there.
Makes sense. Coupons definitely work on me. All right.
Everybody loves them, basically.
All right, let's talk about timing. This question is for both Fiona and Santiago. First, what should you try? When should you try to re-engage? At what stage? Install but not open, abandoned purchase but not a long time ago, registered but not active. What do you think, Fiona?
So I think those are all really good times to run engagement campaigns. Like when we look at the user funnel from first open to purchase, there are always stages that people stop moving down the funnel for one reason or another. So a good time in general for advertisers to start app re-engagement is when they see a significant amount of users stopping at one particular point. And as you mentioned, that could be that folks are installing your app but not opening it for some reason, or they've used the app but haven't yet made a purchase, or they're a lapsed user. And so we have a lot of different combinations of stages that you can put your audiences into and segment them and reach them that way.
Now, how long after the last activity should you wait?
Great question, and one that I get a lot. We've seen a lot of variance on re-engagement timeframes at different points in the user journey. But in all honesty, I think advertisers know best. I mean, I think as a marketer, you'll know what constitutes a lapsed user for your app. So it could be a lapsed user is someone who hasn't used your app in 15 days, in 30 days. I think it's all about really testing and iterating and seeing what the best approach is for you.
Okay, and I mean, thinking about the messaging, how do you make it sound natural or normal?
Yeah, we've seen, we're still in pretty early days in our beta with app campaigns for engagement, but we're seeing some good strategies of folks really trying to make their ads more customized to the users that they're reaching. So trying to make the ads look as natural and as integrated as possible. So for example, I think it also depends on the goal of your campaign. So if you're trying to bring back users of it who have installed your app but not yet made a purchase, which is a common use case we're seeing a lot right now, you could use more effective retention-focused call to actions such as buy now to try to, or provide incentives, as Santiago mentioned, those also work well, to give users a reason to come back into your app and to convert or to complete the action that you're looking for them to do.
Makes sense. Now, Santiago, are you seeing anything different? What about you? When should you try to re-engage, or when do you usually re-engage?
I agree with Fiona on this one. All the parts of the funnel are really good for re-engagement campaign. And basically all that you want to achieve are all the most conversions out of it. The duration out of it, it depends basically on the campaign. For me, it's more related to the ad fatigue that you're going to get, and how much your audience is going to change throughout that period. And basically it all comes down to A/B testing and to see like what's the appropriate message, like to feel like from a creative and message perspective, what's the more natural way to communicate and to get an user to make an action.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes humanizing the message really works.
Yeah, that's the best one. And you can get the most out of it when you start personalizing communication. Like it's nice to receive a push like, hey, Santi, remember to do this or do that when you're doing it, or when they're offering you something new. It's kind of good, but you cannot get that with all the channels.
Yep, makes sense. Now, this next question actually is, again, for you, Santiago. I want to talk about what success looks like. Can you share some examples of campaigns when you've seen a lot of success?
Yeah, well, engagement campaigns, well, first of all, for me, success is when you break all what's expected of your objectives. When you're like growing 2 times of what you expected at the same cost, and you really learn from it, and you can basically start iterating out of it. That's what success comes like. And examples, it's kind of difficult for me to share it, since we at Rappi have grown like a 25% month-over-month rate. So it's kind of difficult to lose focus. But what has really worked for us is just like to keep working on different messages and on different parts of the funnel, so that we kind of get most conversions at the lower cost. But I think that's what we all try to achieve on a daily basis.
Now, do you have any examples of something that hasn't worked?
Yeah, starting with a really segmented base. That really worked for us. We tried to like really set a campaign where we thought that we knew what the users wanted to get the communication out of, and we did like this 10 segments out of it, and start like a really specific measures for each out of them. And this really didn't work because we find out that we were wasting lots of money. So as I mentioned it earlier when we started, I like to now we always start like with a broad audience, and to get the most out of it, and then we start analyzing based on data what's happening, what are really their interest in, and what type of message we can like start changing to start segmenting, but in a more broader way.
Got it. Start large and then use the data to segment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
All right. Now, this next question for both Fiona and Santiago. Speaking of budgets and getting there, what kinds of budgets are you seeing being allocated to re-engagement, maybe as a % of total or as compared to acquisition? Fiona, let's start with you.
Sure, another important question. I think many advertisers don't necessarily set a fixed budget for re-engagement, but they try to find the right mix of budget between user acquisition and re-engagement efforts. And if we think about the app lifecycle, in the early stage of an app campaign, maybe you're just going and launching your app, most of the budgets are used to acquire new users. And then we see that a lot of advertisers start allocating budget to re-engagement campaigns after they have a stable user base. and then they'll adjust it over time depending on their goals. So for example, we have a gaming client right now that started app re-engagement campaigns after a few months of their first UA campaigns, because they saw a higher ROI from re-engaging their existing users versus acquiring new users.
Makes sense. Santiago, what about you? What do you see for budgets?
I think it depends, and it varies according to the market maturity where you are. But I think it's getting up to a 30% of out of the total marketing budget. But it depends also on on the tools and on the different channels that you're using, because there's some that you can really it's really hard to estimate at direct cost out of them. Like basically like push notifications and email, that it's most like all the engineers that you need to get the most out of each tool, but it's not a cost per send or something like that.
You're right. It's super important to have the right tools in your toolbox. All right. Now, this next question is pretty interesting. For Santiago, let's talk about regionality. You're in a lot of different countries. Do you see different trends in different regions?
Oh yeah, definitely. Every country is different, and every city on each country is different. Is very different by its own. And it's kind of funny because you need to really understand what's happening around. There's a a culture based on each city and on each country, and you are going to start mixing your content and your creatives based on that. Like for example, it's really funny. In Brazilian people are really more relaxed, so they're used to seeing people in swimwear promoting different products. But for example, here in Bogota, that the beach is really far away, you're not going to feel related with that type of content. So it varies a lot, and you really need to learn out of it.
That's really funny. Now, Fiona, you're on a global level. Do you see the same type of regional variations?
Yeah, I do. So I work globally with advertisers in each of the regions. So it's really interesting to see the different approaches, actually. And Santiago, I love these examples. One area I would like to call out is on creatives. So we're definitely seeing more success when an advertiser can go ahead and localize their assets for the regions that they're targeting. Aside from creative, I think it's fairly straightforward maybe for me to call out that you should set your bid and budgets accordingly to the region that you're trying to reach. And then lastly, on audiences, I'll talk a little bit about audience size later, but we want to make sure that you don't go too small with your audience size or overly segmented, as we've mentioned before. So one way that you could counteract this is if you have smaller regions, perhaps you could combine your audiences and your geo selections to better reach our list size guidelines.
Makes sense. Thank you. Sure. All right. Well, for the next question, this is actually getting a little into a newer topic, monetization and ROI. Now, Santiago, let's start with you. What are you seeing typically for re-engagement campaigns when it comes to monetization and ROI?
Well, ROI is just like a measure that we're not taking that much into account. But I think that for a starting point, like set it basically to double up your investment. I think that's a good start point, because you want to get the most out of it. And the most that you can increase it, the better. And talking about monetization is the way that we're measuring ourselves. And what we want to achieve basically is like an incremental GMV out of each campaign. So it's kind of related with the lifetime value of the users, like basically what we're achieving once that user gets that order on the next couple of days based on that communication.
Great. And Fiona, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Santiago makes some great points there. I have a couple of things to add. I agree that ROI varies on different events. And I think that looking at the LTV of the user holistically will provide a more, overall view of campaign performance. One thing I did want to build on is the user funnel. So different events in the user funnel will of course carry different values for the marketer. So you might determine that an app open or an IAP, one is more valuable than the other. and how to approach both of those. So we recommend that advertisers really adjust their bids on different events to reflect that value. But overall, for app campaigns for re-engagement, advertisers have been really happy with the beta and with early results across all of the various verticals and industries that they're running on. Most of our early gaming successes in app campaigns for engagement have been across gaming, retail, and indeed finance. But we're seeing the campaigns work more and more for each of our verticals.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of really great success stories and with some of our beta customers as well. But speaking of app campaigns for engagement, I mean, a lot of marketers want to know, how can they be successful with these campaigns? I know you have a few words on this.
I do. So I think we have a couple slides prepared. Great, thank you so much. So as I alluded to earlier, we're starting to reference more and more the app lifecycle. So that's really what you do in the run up to launching your app. So it could be pre-reg, what you do once you're launching your app. So you might be thinking about running app install campaigns, and then the post-launch stage, which is where app campaigns for engagement fit under. If you want to go to the next one. So as I've been mentioning, app campaigns for re-engagement is our cross-channel TCPA product that's currently in beta. It uses Google's unique machine learning technology to help you engage and retain your existing app users across all of Google's channels. So you can see from the slide here, you can run across search, across display, YouTube, and then lastly, we're very excited that we're beginning to run some experiments on Play inventory also. So I often get the question, what business goals could I possibly reach by running app campaigns for engagement? And I just took out some of the top 3 most common that we're seeing in the beta phase. The first one, which is unique to Google on Android, is the ability to drive first opens. So if you have users who have downloaded your app but haven't yet opened it, one idea is that you could remind them why they installed your app or game in the first place. The second here is a term that I'm sure all marketers are familiar with, which is, how do I activate my lapsed users, people that have dropped out of my app after a certain period of time for various reasons. So to reach these users, you can share new features and content and give them really a fresh reason to come back into your app. And then lastly, you can use app campaigns for re-engagement to close deals. So do you have users who could use just a little nudge to complete a valuable in-app action? With these campaigns, you can help them return into the app to make a purchase or complete that action. And then, of course, with any Google campaign, we are always all about sharing best practices for a specific campaign type. So some of you who may already be running app campaigns for install might be familiar with our best practices, which we've tweaked slightly for app campaigns for engagement as we go. So the first recommendation here is around bidding in events. And the idea is that our models need conversions to be able to learn and scale. So we encourage you to choose an event that generates at least 100 conversions per week and per campaign. On the budget side of things, we encourage you to set a budget of at least 50 times your TCPA for shallow events and 10 times your TCPA for those deeper events. Then looking at audiences, which is an area that I focus a lot of my time on. As I mentioned, we want you to choose a large enough audience to reach enough users. So one big recommendation that we have here is please only use supported user lists and use cases. The only type of user list that we currently accept in app campaigns for engagement are device IDs. And you might be familiar working with phone numbers or emails. So just make a note of the device ID outline here. And then secondly is the topic of audience list sizes. So when we started out with the beta, our initial recommendation was that you should have a list size of a minimum 250K users. And we recognize that that's pretty high and maybe not achievable for all of our advertisers. So we have revised these guidelines, and we now recommend that you can go as low as possibly even 10K users, with the caveat that we would encourage you to bid up accordingly so that you can have a good chance in the auction of reaching your users. And then lastly, a concept that we're all very familiar with is really driving home the importance of creatives in app campaigns for engagement. So we want you to be able to give users a reason to come back into your app, and you can really achieve this with effective creative. So as Santiago and myself mentioned before, You can use creative to promote new features, events, or anything else to get past users back. And as with any kind of campaign with Google, we encourage you to use all of the open and available inventory slots to reach as many users as possible. So really take advantage of text, image, and video creatives and utilizing that full inventory. Great, so I think that wraps up the slides from me, and I think I'll hand it back to you now, Christen, to kick us off on the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Fiona. That was really great. It's a lot of information, and I'm sure a lot of people are excited to learn more if you haven't gotten started already on app campaigns for engagement. Now, that concludes all the questions I have for the panelists. However, I've seen quite a few questions come in from the audience. So if you don't mind, Santiago, Fiona, I'm going to start asking you some questions from there. The first question I have here is, what is the best way to do A/B testing in app campaigns for engagement?
Yeah, that is a great question, and one that I think we're still working to build on. So definitely do get in touch with your account manager with a specific question. We've seen a couple of folks do things like audience splits, for example, but again, do run it by your AM and account team so we can give you the best way to run an audience split test. Also, potentially you could run geo-based testing as well.
Awesome, thank you, Fiona. All right, next question. How do you measure incrementality? How often should we run a lift study?
Yeah, these are great questions. I think we're also working on some documentation around incrementality testing for ACE. So I would say stay tuned on this topic. It's definitely something that we're working to build out more recommendations on. We have some initial beta advertisers running some kinds of incrementality testing. So hopefully we can share some more details on that soon.
Awesome. Santiago, have you done any incrementality testing yet?
We were going to start one basically on the beta phase that Fiona just mentioned. We are one of the advertisers that were cleared, but our strategy changed the last couple of months, so we weren't able to do it at the moment.
Okay. Well, always time to try. Now, the next question here is app campaigns for engagement. Are they available on both platforms, Fiona?
Yes, it's available on both iOS and Android.
And what's the distribution of spend on each?
That's a great question, and one unfortunately I do not have to hand.
All right.
I don't know, Santiago, if you have anything, anecdotally speaking, if you've seen anything.
But I think that from the advertisement side, it depends on what you want to achieve. I think that like most advertisers want to spend more on iOS, basically of the type of users that they are. But it also depends on the type of I don't know, of commerce that you have on what you want to achieve.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, now here's one for Fiona. Will social casino ever be a thing for app campaigns for engagement?
We'll see. I would encourage you to keep in contact with your account managers for any updates on that, and we'll also be sending out any comms on that if that decision is made, but it's not available right now.
Okay. Now this question is for either of you. How do you do negative targeting? What if we want to exclude a specific audience?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we don't. You might be familiar with how you run exclusions in what we called our standalone campaigns before we had universal app campaigns for install. With app campaigns for engagement, it's slightly different. So it's a little bit of algebra involved, but I can say that we have a really great recipe guide that guides you through each of the use cases and how to implement them step by step. So if I take one example, say I have a ride sharing app and I want to target everyone who has not yet taken a ride. What I will do is I will set up, the first list I will create is all users of my app. Then so that's list A. Then I will set up list B, which is everyone who has taken a ride. And then I will subtract one from the other to get everyone who has not yet taken a ride. So I hope that answers your question. It is possible, but it's just the methodology which you apply. And we have a lot of great guidelines and guides written on this. So again, your AM can share all of those with you.
Awesome. All right, so great question. What do I need to start app campaigns for re-engagement? Deep linking, conversion tracking, what do we need?
Yeah, so those are the main ones. You do need deep linking, of course. Conversion tracking, also that you're passing us the right events that you might want to be optimizing towards, and that you also have audiences set up, whether it's with your third party or with Firebase or otherwise.
Okay. And how do you bid on re-engagement campaigns, Santiago?
That's a really tricky one because it's not that easy, or not it's not that as straightforward as you could do it with an install campaign. But it's basically like try to achieve the same, like how many users of the, like what's the percentage of the users that are going to convert based on the audience, and you just like try to figure out a way. It's like, for me, like, and when you like have the money to do it, it's just start really kind of high, like 15 to 20% up of what you think, and then it starts scaling down and up to the point that you feel comfortable bidding.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think more than anything, you have to think about what is the value of the user to me, and how do I set my bid accordingly. On a very tactical level, it's a TCPA bidding product. And looking forward in our roadmap, we are also considering TROAS, making that available as a bidding option too.
Awesome. All right, Santiago, another question for you. What is the best way to re-engage users without push notifications?
Oh, tricky one. Social media is still like a really good place to be, but with a really appropriate message. Email, it depends. You just need to be like a really good brand for email to be like a really good channel for you. I think that it's kind of past communication in some way. And there's some experimentations we've done with SMS, but it's kind of spamming users in some way.
Awesome. No, that makes sense. Okay, I think that was the last question. Oh, it looks like it looks like we have a few questions still coming in, but we can definitely get back to you on anyone whose questions we didn't get to on this webinar. And I really do appreciate everyone's participation. This has been really great. Before we wrap up really quick, I wanted to just do a quick plug for Singular. One thing that you really need as marketers, having some of the best tools in your toolbox. And for Singular, we've recently pushed out a new solution around re-engagement and re-engagement for attribution. Singular is a Google measurement partner, but is also a measurement partner of many of the biggest publishers out there. And we're offering some of the most flexible and granular analytics and re-engagement measurement out there. So if you want to learn more about Singular's re-engagement product, please reach out to either your AM if you're already working with us, or if you want to request a demo at singular.net/demo.
And Christen, if I may, I just saw a really valuable question come in that I maybe should have mentioned at the start, which is how do I get started on engagement? So we are currently in expanded beta phase. Please reach out to your account manager at Google if you're interested in joining our beta. Like I said, we're really in expansion mode now, seeing some great success stories as we work towards general availability launch. So please reach out.
Thank you. All right, well, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, Santiago and Fiona, for joining us. This has been a great experience working with you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christen.
All right, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.